Happy anniversary. It's an honor to be with you. You're an inspiration to me and millions of others. The fact is, today we live under a lawless president, a feckless Congress, and an all-powerful Supreme Court. The federal Leviathan consumes nearly 25% of the entire economy and gobbles up whole industries. We are $17.3 trillion in fiscal operating debt. We owe over $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities. There's not enough money on the planet Earth to pay that back. And the overall debt, when it's all combined, grows by $5 to $7 trillion a year. And this president proclaims the era of austerity is over. The federal government's now the nation's largest creditor, debtor, lender, employer, consumer, contractor, grantor, property owner, tenant, insurer, health care provider, and pension guarantor. So much for limited government. It unleashes thousands of regulations and rules every single year. Over the course of a decade, it fills nearly 1 million pages in the Federal Register. We are being devoured by the very government that is supposed to serve us. The centralization and concentration of power is now moving at breakneck speed as the Constitution's firewalls have been breached. And I don't need a liberal law professor from George Washington to tell me what's going on either. Although we welcome them. The Tea Party movement is the only thing left that stands between what remains of our republic and the tyranny of runaway government. And I say this from the bottom of my heart and my soul. And I thank you. You are the citizens from all walks of life and every corner of the country who possess the spirit and enthusiasm of the Founding Fathers, proclaim the principles of individual liberty and unalienable rights as set forth in our Declaration, and insist on the federal government's compliance with the Constitution's limits. You are astutely aware of the peril of the moment and all that is at stake. And for this, you are smeared and attacked by the ruling class, Democrats and Republicans alike, by the media, from the New York Slimes to the Wall Street Journal, and countless others who are dragging this nation into the abyss. And I know that at times you wonder if we'll be able to reverse course. You wonder if it's all worth it. You wonder if you should live quiet lives among family and friends and tend to your own needs. But I also know you're Americans, and you cannot be idle, and you will not be silent while a relative handful of self-aggrandizing masterminds seek to lord over you and your fellow citizens. You will not allow your country to fail. Now let me remind you, December 23rd, 1776, when it looked like the American Revolution was lost, what was left of General George Washington's Continental Army gathered for what the history books would describe as the Battle of Trenton. Before those men boarded the rickety wooden boats on a daunting course to cross the frozen Delaware River on that miserable winter night, they began to read aloud from Thomas Paine's The American Crisis. And they repeated these words. This became their motto. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country. But he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. That's you. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. And triumph we must, and triumph we will. Now, my dear friend Jeffrey Lord, both of us worked in the Reagan administration, so we're fond of quoting the great Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was fond of quoting Thomas Paine, those exact words that I just read to you. And he would recite them, campaign stop after campaign stop, whether he was running in the Republican primaries or running in the general election. You see, Ronald Reagan was not part of the establishment. He was an outsider. And like you and so many others throughout history, he had the courage to stand up and be counted. And for this, also like you, Reagan and his supporters were disparaged and dismissed by the same ruling class. And I'll give you a few examples. George Will, 1974. Reagan is 63, and he looks it. His hair is still remarkably free of gray, but around the mouth and neck, he looks like an old man. He has never demonstrated substantial national appeal. His hardcore support today consists primarily of the kamikaze conservatives who thought the 1960 Goldwater campaign was jolly fun. And there is reason to doubt that Reagan is well suited to appeal to the electorate that just produced a Democratic landslide. George Will. Chuck Percy, former Republican senator from Illinois. A Reagan nomination and the crushing defeat likely to follow could signal the beginning of the end of our party as an effective force in American life. He said Reagan is far out of the centrist mainstream. The hell is the centrist mainstream anyway? I used to think it was the Constitution. I used to think it was free market. I used to think it was private property rights. Apparently that's now right wing. John Rhodes, who would become the Republican leader of the always in the minority Republicans in the House at that time, he said as soon as Reagan gets away from his cliches and his campaign slogans, he's in trouble. Nelson Rockefeller, who leads the current Republican Party, I think, he warned Republican governors in terms of Reagan's run that no major American party can long endure by directing its appeal to a narrow minority. It will not serve the nation to have our major parties polarized at ideological extremes. Does this not sound familiar to you? So damn many of these, I could go on all day with this. I've got a radio show to do and a president to attack, so I can't stay here all day. Well, let me end with this one from our friends at the Wall Street Journal editorial page. In 1979, the Wall Street Journal wrote, "For political packaging, we do not need to turn to a 68-year-old man." Well, maybe they'll write tomorrow, for political packaging, we don't need to turn to a 68-year-old woman who would be Hillary Clinton. But I digress. Now, as you heard from my friend Jeff Lord, Gerald Ford went on to lose to a very weak Democrat candidate named Jimmy Carter. Reagan went on to win in 1980 and 84, two of the biggest landslides in American history. Popular vote, I would remind Karl Rove, and Electoral College. Now, having campaigned personally for Reagan in 1976 and 80, I want you to listen to me. I feel certain he would be enormously proud of you. In fact, I bet he would have been thrilled to stand before you right here. And thank you for all you're doing. and all you've done, and congratulate you on this 5th anniversary of the Tea Party movement. And I think it's appropriate to end my comments with a truism from President Reagan, which is the last paragraph in my book, Liberty and Tyranny, which most of you have heard by now, but I'm going to repeat it anyway, for those of you who haven't. Reagan wrote and said this many times: freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States when men were free. You folks, you're an inspiration to people like me and millions of others. It's a great honor to be here, and on behalf of all those other people and your fellow citizens and generations yet to come, I want to thank you, and God bless all of you.